If you were looking to be a contract killer, to murder people for money, and to get away with it, how would you do it?
What if there was a how-to book, a guide that told you about covering your tracks, hiding bodies, even how to find murder for hire gigs?
In 1983, a fringe publisher put out just such a book.
It's called Hitman, a technical manual for independent contractors.
And we're covering a series called Hitman that's all about it.
That's on this episode of So Much Crime.
So Little Time. Before we get to the episode, just a reminder, check us out on Patreon. It's patreon.com/so-much-crime, so little time. You'll get access to episodes early, a bunch of bonus content, extended discussions, things that you don't find in these shows, outtakes, and that wonderful feeling of supporting the show. Patreon.com/so-much-crime, so little time.
Visit us for the warm and fuzzies.
Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Dee, and in this episode, we'll introduce you to Hitman.
After that, we tackle a true crime question of the week.
If you're new here, welcome.
In these preview episodes, we help you discover a new story.
So don't worry if you haven't listened to Hitman yet. We're going to dive straight into episode 1. There'll be no spoilers for what's to come.
You also find a link to Hitman in our show notes.
In our next episode, we'll discuss the whole series. But right now, we just want to decide if this is a crime that is worth your time. Before we jump into our crime, we gotta go to the time machine. But Jeff, what is the time machine?
Well, so some of the crimes that we talk about are really kind of dark. And we thought we'd do something a little light at the beginning of the show and also just place ourselves in the time where part of the story takes place. This time we're not talking first about a crime, we're talking about a book. And that book came out in 1983.
So, Jeff, you're bringing us a book?
I want to talk about a book. I've got a song or two, and I've got a movie. I'm going to read the blurb from the cover of a book that came out on November 14th, 1983. Are you ready?
Okay.
When the Creeds move in to a beautiful old house in rural Maine, it all seems too good to be true.
Maine. I feel like you talk about Maine as much as you talk about your English degrees.
It's one of the top books of 1983.
Okay.
And I got one of my degrees in Maine, so... it all seems to be...
Really? You've never mentioned.
Too good to be true. Physician father, beautiful wife, charming little daughter, adorable infant son, and now an idyllic home. As a family, they've got it all, right down to the friendly car. But the nearby woods hide a blood-chilling truth, more terrifying than death itself and hideously more powerful. The Creeds are going to learn that sometimes dead is better.
Jesus.
Any guesses?
That's a bit much. No, I've no idea.
I can give you hints.
That might help.
I'm going to give you an obvious hint and see if you can guess the title. It's Stephen King.
Okay.
Have you read any Stephen King?
I think... So horror novels are up there with me with like horror movies. Like I don't love them.
And yet you listen to so much about death and murder. All right, I'll just tell you.
Yeah.
It's Pet.
I never said I was simple.
It's Pet Sematary. So Pet Sematary came out in 1983.
Have you read it?
Nope. Haven't seen the movie either. I have read several Stephen King books and I've seen a bunch of movies, but not this one. That would have been a better story if I had. But
yeah, this might be a bad story as well. I've got a book too.
Okay.
I'm not going to pretend like you might know it. So it is a book that is set in Northern Ireland in the 1980s. It tells the story of a young Catholic man living in a Protestant area. I can tell you what, Jeff, not going to be a whole lot of fun. He struggles with guilt, violence, sorrow over a woman whose husband he helped murder. It's set against the backdrop of fear and violence in Ulster, where... it was a pretty wild time. Your face is doing mad stuff.
I'd have no idea what this is.
Mm.
Is this a book you've read?
No. It was like one of the top. It was the top Irish book in 1983 for Ireland. It came out in 1983.
Is it a book you've heard of?
No, but Brendan McLaverty I've heard of. Who's the author?
What's the name of the book?
Cal. Oh yeah, I forgot about that part. Cal is the name of it. I'll post it in a link in our show notes.
All right. I have Easy Song, Hard Song.
Easy Song.
All right.
Warm Me Up.
All right. Here's my flat read of one of the top songs of 1983. Also, a lot of great songs in 1983. This was
Tell me about it.
really hard to choose, but I just ended up picking one that I personally really like. Ready?
Yeah.
She was more like a beauty queen.
Of a movie scene.
Yeah. How'd you get on the first line? What's the song?
I am the one. Kid is Billie Jean
Yeah.
by Michael Jackson.
Yeah. I mean, that's the number 2 song in the U.S.
Okay.
in 1983. The number 1 song was even easier, and they say the name of the song every other line. It's Every Breath You Take by the Police.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Tune.
can I give you a harder one?
Yeah.
I think it's harder. Maybe it's as easy. It was hard. This would have been hard for me. So, I'm
Okay.
giving it to you. Traveling in a fried out combi. On it.
You're really trying to stagger the words.
I am. That's my only tactic.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
On a hippie trail. Head full of zombie. I met a strange lady. She made me nervous. She took me in and gave me breakfast. And she said, "Do you come from a land
Land down under. Is it?
where women glow and men plunder? Can't you hear?
Oh my God.
Can't you hear the thunder?"
Is that UB40?
No, it's Men at Work.
Land down under. Okay. I have one more song.
Okay.
Okay. This song came out in 1983. It went to number 1 in the UK and was moderately successful, is what Wikipedia says, in the United States. It was re-released.
This was real well.
It was re-released in 1988 and went to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100.
Is it Beat It by Michael Jackson?
No. This is one of those ones that is going to psyching yourself out, or else I'm speaking too loud. I don't know which.
I believe
it
in
is.
myself.
Okay.
I'm going to get one of these one day.
Yeah. I'm going to have to not sing some words.
Honestly,
because
you could sing and I might not still get
the name of the song comes up so often. Okay. Goes to my head. Makes me forget that I still need her so. It's up to you. All I can do, I've done. Memories won't go. Memories won't go. I'd have sworn that with time, thoughts of you would leave my head. I was wrong.
Is this UB40?
Now I find just one thing makes me forget.
Red Wine.
Yay!
All right. That is a great song.
It's not I'm not saying it's a bad song.
No, I knew that one. I actually loved that song when I was a kid, which is weird. When I was a real little kid, I didn't.
Well, it came back out in 1988, so presumably you heard it maybe when you were 8ish.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Like how my kids enjoy Imagine Dragons now.
Yeah.
Tell me about the podcast, Jeff.
So this podcast came out in 2019. The host is Jasmyn Morris. Have you heard of Jasmyn Morris before?
Nope.
So Jasmyn Morris is the executive editor for StoryCorps. And so she is a host, producer, works on development, production of StoryCorps, which I listen to all the time on NPR and really love. And then in her bio, it says when she's not making podcasts, she's playing with her band or spending time on her twin sister's farm sanctuary. That's our host, Jasmyn Morris. There are 9 episodes. Each one is about 30 to 45 minutes long.
Side note to this. In the first episode, it says it's, I ended up with an 8-episode podcast and I was like, shite, I didn't count right for like our teaser in the last one. But it's actually 8 and a coda.
I noticed that. Yeah, I called it 9, but you're right. It's technically 8 episodes.
No, well, I just want to call out that if someone listens to episode 1, they hear 8. It's not that we're incorrect. It's not like that D can't count. Me, I can count.
What's the story about that we hear about in episode 1, D?
Oh, yeah. So the story is basically, it's called If Books Could Kill. And we hear about this actual real life book, like not a fake book, a published book, a book published by Paladin Press called Hitman, Technical Manual for Independent Contractors. that was put out in 1983. It was removed from the shelves in
99.
So we hear about that to begin with, and then we hear about a murder that happened, the murder of Millie Horn, her son Trevor, and Trevor's nurse, Janice Saunders. And obviously, we're pushing it all together and saying whoever murdered these people, they think the book was, you know.
We hear about a possible suspect named James Edward Perry who had this
who
book.
They think was a hitman.
Yeah.
And who murdered Millie, Trevor, and Janice in Millie and Trevor's home in 1993.
1993, yeah.
In 1993. And so that's episode 1. It's, do you know what, Jeff, it is? It's bonkers. Tell me, Jeff, your thoughts, because I will say before we jump into Jeff's thoughts about the episode, 15 minutes in, Jeff sent me a message. I'm going to read the message live on air. Message said, "What the fuck you got me listening to here?"
I did send that.
To which I said, "I have no idea. Is it wild? I didn't even listen to the trailer." And he said, "It goes to some dark places in the first 15 minutes. So, Jeff, did your what the fuck continue throughout the episode, or tell me your thoughts?
A little bit. So yeah, I think I messaged you that right after the single mom, her beloved child on a respirator or a breathing device, and his overnight nurse were brutally murdered.
Mm-hmm. I mean, fair message after listening to that.
And I thought this seemed like a whimsical podcast about a book for hitmen, and then turns out it's about horrific murder.
When have you ever put whimsical beside a true crime podcast?
No, you're right. I should know
Like, we're
better.
on episode 59, Jeff. Means like we're likely on an average of our 30th true crime podcast that we've listened to.
I just didn't know,
And
like,
you're
okay.
expecting whimsical? Who owns the problem, Jeff?
All right. When I think of hitmen murdering people, I don't think of single moms, their beloved children, and an overnight nurse as being the people getting
100%.
murdered.
And I think that's what, like, it was... Jeez, this word has been overused at the moment. It's my new interesting juxtaposition. It's like this really weird side by side of this horrendous concept of a book, but nearly like a parody, like Hitman, like technical manual, versus, oh wow, like this is really gruesome.
Yeah.
This isn't just someone who wants to off one person, not that that's okay. I don't know, the addition of Trevor, who is Millie's son, who was born with a huge number of disabilities and like was on like breathing apparatus, especially overnight. It was like a sleep apnea apparatus thing to make sure like an alarm would go off when he would stop breathing.
Yeah.
The addition of Trevor and like his vulnerability to an already obviously gruesome story, if we're talking about a murder of a single mother, the fact that her other daughters weren't there. One of the daughters happened to not be there just because Millie was due to fly out. She was an air hostess and she was due to fly out the next morning. So her daughter was staying in someone else's house. Like, if she had been there.
Yeah. So Trevor was a twin. Tamiel was the other twin. And then Tiffany was the older daughter, who was a teenager away at college, her freshman year of college when this happened. Yeah, so we hear from Tiffany, who is now, this happened in 1983, so she's a full-grown adult now. But she thinks she was like 19 when this happened. Mm-hmm. This story of Millie and that murder, with sort of background on Paladin Press and this book. We don't really know who the author was. There was a pen named Rex Farrell, but then we hear a little bit about the people who started up this press. There's Peter Lund and Robert Brown, who were couple of Vietnam vets, who one of them also started Soldier of Fortune magazine. A lot of these books were a bunch of like libertarian things, kind of like First Amendment, extremist stuff. Very controversial. A lot of it was not all of the things they put out were controversial, but a lot of it was. Yeah, this seemed like we definitely got, I feel like, two very different pieces of a story in a very short first episode.
I don't even know if it's two. Like, well, maybe like it's two kind of umbrella pieces. Yeah, like it was kind of wild because we have this interesting plot where we're introduced to like the villain at the start, and the villain is the book.
Yeah.
And part of the villain is Rex Farrell, as you said, who wrote the book. And there's a lot of who would write this book, who would publish this book. Then we just get launched into the victims, which was obviously horrendous to listen to. I did appreciate that they didn't go into, I don't know, they told a story. There was no drama added to the story. It was already dramatic enough. I feel like I say that with quite a few podcasts, but I feel like that is something that I really appreciate when we're dealing with someone's death. That it's not as if let's make this the most salacious description of what happened. It felt to me very factual.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And also like we had a good bit of the victims' personality and lives and like being a victim of this crime, you know, them as people, which I appreciated. And then we jump into, the Paladin Press, and they're like, we'll talk about them a little bit more later. And I'm like, okay, just like throw it out there. They had a lot of weird tidbits there, like how they want to set information free.
Yeah.
And also they were very much, one of the questions I had for you was the Paladin Press were very much like, you know, we've no culpability here. We're just presenting information. We're not the ones going out and doing X, Y, or Z. We're just putting the information out there. I know the host, Jasmyn Morris, alluded to, like, you know, we have this a lot right now. A lot of information out there. What do you make of them even saying that, like stepping back from the culpability of it?
I think it's bullshit. I think it's irresponsible. I think this is that sort of false hide behind the First Amendment thing, that the extreme example is the like, yes, your freedom of speech is protected in this country, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's not freedom of speech, right? Like, there are limits to that freedom of speech. There's where you're causing harm and violence to others. So we hear an interview from one of the guys from the press, Peter Lund, where he's being asked after the Oklahoma City bombing if he feels any responsibility. He's basically saying, no, but if his books helped someone bomb that building in Oklahoma City and murder a whole bunch of people, and they wouldn't have been able to do it without the information that he put out there, I think he does bear responsibility for that. I think if this Hitman book helped people to get away with murder, I don't think you can just say First Amendment.
But how does that come? Like, I understand that, I suppose, back in 1983 in a way when this is put out there. But like, how do you level that up with what's going on today with the internet?
I think it's the same thing. I mean, I think if you put plans on the internet of how to build a ghost gun or how to build a nuclear bomb, and someone goes and does it from the plans that you build, the person who enabled that bears responsibility, I think, personally.
And how does that compare to like true crime podcasts or novels or crime dramas on TV or documentaries about serial killers or Dr. Miracle? Like,
are those providing people with information that they shouldn't have?
Aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I think there's a line somewhere. Like, this particular book is presented as an instruction manual. It's not, it doesn't seem, and maybe we'll find out more about that. I presume we'll find out more about that later. It's not done for sort of entertainment value. That's where I think there's a line.
So if it was written as a novel, it would be okay. And also, was it not written as entertainment? Because actually we hear from Rex Farrell, the writer, the ever elusive Rex Farrell, who's the author of the book. And he seemingly was like, oh, hold on a sec. I'm not actually a hitman. Don't tell anyone. But I picked this up from TV and drama and a little bit of research, whatever. Is this not a fake how-to book? Like, look at the cover.
The cover looks pretty fake. Yeah.
The cover looks like something, I'd pick up and be like, this looks interesting.
Yeah.
And then it's like,
the cover looks like an old, like almost like comic book or something. It's a man in a 1940s yellow suit with a gun with a silencer on it, standing sort of ominously over like a red outline of a body.
Do you not think that he probably made this or wrote this book presuming that people would take it, judge the book by its cover, and realize that this isn't a do you want to murder someone? Pick me up and buy me. This is a...
Does that make it okay?
I mean...
If his intent...
Again, I go back to the true crime podcasts we're listening to. I go back to the documentaries and all the serial killers that are being pushed out like nobody's business at the moment, Jeff. What's the difference?
But are those presented as how-to manuals? This is presented as a how-to manual.
But like what? So how you present yourself is more important than how you actually are. The book is presenting itself. The cover of it is very clearly not to be taken seriously.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a fuzzy, there's like a gray line here.
If someone committed a murder, which I'm sure they have, and said, I saw it on CSI, what do we do with CSI?
No, you're right. Yeah.
There is so much, especially now, and it's different back when these murders happen, but there is an element here of like, we don't have any control over the amount of information that is out there. We have control over ourselves and our understanding of right and wrong and our understanding of empathy. And I feel like we need to lean on that. We don't focus on, well, if the information is given to me, of course I've done X, Y, and Z.
I think that's a fair point. I do think, yes, okay. Yes, Dee was right, somewhat.
Somewhat. What part of me was not right there? That was a great point. I'm delighted with myself.
It was a pretty good point. I think we need to learn more about this book. This book is, as we understand it, this press seems to be about sort of like pushing that boundary.
Did you not think that some of the names of the books were funny though? They had like an eclectic mix of books. It wasn't all about murder. It was like one of them was called Screw Unto Others.
Yeah.
Like, do unto others. Oh, I loved it. So funny.
I don't know. I do have other questions though.
Go on.
Let's say you're going to buy this book to use it
Okay.
to actually murder someone.
Mm-hmm. It's on my bookshelf.
So the reason that they connect this book to this murder is that their suspect, James Perry, had the book and another one of the books on disposable silencers from this publisher. Why wouldn't you be able to buy this book more anonymously?
It was 1993.
1993. Is he buying it at a Barnes and Noble?
I mean, he followed the directions of the book seemingly from episode 1 we hear, and he stayed in a motel nearby and he paid cash because the book tells you to pay cash. But this motel is like, if you pay cash, you have to show an ID. So he had to show his ID, so he couldn't give a fake name. I don't think whoever this hitman is actually like thinking about what he's doing.
So you don't use a credit card, but you show him your driver's license?
I know, that's my point.
That's so dumb.
But like he probably went into Barnes and Noble and was like, oh, I actually am on the reward scheme. Make sure I get my couple of points for choosing this book. Jeff nearly spat his whiskey out of that comment. That's why I'm laughing.
All right. What other questions do you have?
I have 2 frustrations I think I had with it, which was, one was after the murder occurred, they give a snippet of a phone call that the hitman makes.
Yeah.
And apparently it's too grainy to hear, but we think this is him letting his like boss, the person who hired him, giving them an update. But they never like tell you what actually happened in the phone call. And it was really annoying. I've listened to it a few times and I'm like, what did he say? Like, how do you know? I want to know what words is he using? What syntax? Like how am I going to read this and know that this is an update, you know?
This episode is only about 29 minutes without the ads, and it's one where I definitely felt like, oh, I want more from these bits and pieces. I want a little more context. I want a little bit more information.
I mean, that's in episode 1 that I love. I just felt that was weird because it said it, but didn't like tell you what was happening. Like, I understand it when they're saying, look, we're coming back to Paladin Books. We'll go into a deep dive and we'll give you more information. They said that to us. Love that. Love that for us. But this one, they play you the recording and then they're like, it's really hard to hear. But anyway, and I'm like, well, what the fuck is he saying? Translate it for me.
You have other frustrations?
My other frustration is I can't believe they picked Tiffany, who, just for reference, is Millie's daughter, who was 19 at the time and was in college. And they apparently like called to her dorm. She came down and they were like, we need to bring you home. Put her in her car for about an hour, but didn't tell her what happened.
Yeah.
I didn't love that at all. Like, her mind was racing. You know, obviously she knew it was not good, but that feels real traumatic. I mean, this entire situation is extremely traumatic for her.
But that seemed unnecessarily traumatic.
It was seemed unnecessarily traumatic, and I understand they obviously wanted someone who she knew to tell her, but leaving someone for an hour in a car without telling them why they're being...
Yeah, that's horrible.
Yeah,
That's
didn't like it.
How eager are you to keep listening?
To me, this is fascinating. This is very different to anything we've listened to before. We never talked about the host, but I felt like a little bit of a... I felt like she sounded a little bit like Caitlin Collins.
Who's Caitlin Collins?
She's a CNN reporter. I don't know. I felt like her voice sounded a little bit like her. I personally I'm very neutral on the host in episode 1, which is usually a positive sign for me because sometimes I can come in very hard on not liking the host. I'm very interested to see how this all plays out. I'm interested to see where the dad fits into this. He's slightly mentioned within the episode, but not really zoned in on. And it was said, like, you know, he was so many 100 miles away and had an airtight alibi. Which I was like, in a show called Hitman, this seems interesting that someone would ever have an airtight alibi. Anyway, what about you?
I feel like we're in pretty good hands here. I feel like as a host, she kind of guided us through a fairly complicated first episode where a lot happened. We got to hear from a variety of interesting people. We didn't mention it, but we also heard from a couple of lawyers there, including the prosecutor who worked on this case, which was great. I think
he seems solid as well.
Yeah, I am curious how much of the rest of the series is going to be about this one case versus about other cases related to the book, and how much is going to be about the book and how that's going to balance. Because this first episode, I think, was maybe like 60-40 or 50-50 with a little bit about the press and the book and a little bit about this one case. And I don't know
how it's going to play out.
I mean, I'm interested in both stories, so I'm fine if it ends up being 50-50, but I'm also curious. I know there's other stories associated with this book that I'm curious to hear about. So yeah, I'm definitely eager to keep listening.
Exciting. So this is a crime we think right now might be worth your time. Don't forget to visit us at patreon.com/so much crime so little time. You will receive early release episodes, some bonus content, hilarious outtakes. Sign up, throw us a few quid and see if you agree. Are they hilarious? Do you find us as funny as we find ourselves? Who knows? And also you get to support the show, and we should be supported. We are great fun. Don't forget also to rate us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and tell a friend, tell your frenemies, tell your enemies, tell your family, tell your kids. Don't tell your kids unless they're over 18. And join us on Instagram. Tell us your thoughts. Love to see it. Thank you. Bye.
It's time for our true crime question of the week. This podcast is about this book, Hitman, which sounds pretty dark and upsetting and violent, and teaching people how to get away with murder, which pretty dark topic. So the question of the week is, what is the most dangerous or upsetting book that you've ever read?
I have two. One is from when I was a teenager. I read it.
Is it
Came out
Twilight?
in 2002. Yeah, it was so upsetting when I realized they couldn't be together. No, it was not Twilight. Although I loved Twilight. Okay, so the first one was when I was a teenager. I read The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. Did you read it?
No, but I know of it.
Okay, this book kind of haunts me. I have thought about it so much. It's basically the bones of a child are speaking to you from beyond the grave. I remember reading it. I remember then seeing the movie and just being so upset by the movie. I felt like it was so hideous, skin crawling. She had been raped and murdered by someone, and it was, it stuck with me. This is, I don't think I'd say it's dangerous. Like, it wasn't like a fun
But it was
read,
upsetting.
But it was really upsetting. Like, it's one that sticks with me.
Yeah.
The second one that I have is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I'm apologizing if I have butchered the surname there. I remember reading this book when my now husband and I were living with two of his friends. I remember walking around the house with book and tissues in hand, because every time, and it was big, like it was 720 pages. It was, how I don't read that fast. I read this so fast for the fact that it was 720 pages. It was just so emotional and so upsetting. A few friends that I know of have told other friends you love books. Don't read this one. This will not be good for your brain or your heart or your head or whatever. Yeah. It's basically about 4 classmates from Massachusetts who moved to New York to make their way, and how their friendship and ambition changes and whatever. And there's a lot. It's a lot. Have you read it?
No. Wait, what is it called again?
A Little Life.
No. I don't know this book.
It's a bit of addiction, mental health issues. There's trauma that comes to light. There's abuse that comes to light. There's a gay relationship that's it's just like there was so much in it, and it was very emotional. What about you? Tell me something funny. How to for dummies, because that's what first came to my mind when you said this.
So I have 2. One of them is one that probably a lot of people have read, which is Bret Easton Ellis' American Psycho. Have you read that book?
No.
It's also a movie with Christian Bale that was quite popular. I think I saw the movie first, then decided to read the book because Bret Easton Ellis went to my grad school, Bennington College in Vermont. And he went there as an undergrad. And I don't know, he's supposed to be a great writer. What?
He's supposed to be a great writer, and you read his book and you do not believe that he's a great writer?
I think there is something seriously wrong with this man. I actually read a second book by him called Glamorama, and both books, he's written several other books that I have not read, but these...
What's his name?
Bret Easton Ellis. These books are... So American Psycho is about a man, Patrick Bateman, who works on Wall Street in like the 80s, I think, and is involved in this very kind of superficial, super wealthy culture, fine dining and people obsessing over their business cards and their clothes and their, all of that. And then by night, he's a serial killer. The book, more than the movie, goes into really graphic descriptions of how he tortures and mutilates and murders his victims. And I thought, well, maybe it's just this one book because it's about a serial killer. That's why I read the second book. And the second book also, the other book I read, also goes into really horrific descriptions of violence that was very upsetting. So I'm not going to read a third book by him.
Okay.
The other one was very different, but also very upsetting. It's a book by Mina Kandasamy. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. It's called When I Hit You, or A Portrait of the Writer as a Young Wife. And this is a book about a woman who marries a man who is violent to her. And it's about basically spousal abuse and rape. And it is in India, in modern India. It's a very short book. It is very hard to read. It's very well written. I think it's unlike, my experience with Bret Easton Ellis. I think it was very powerful, but it was also deeply upsetting. Sometimes I finish these books and I wonder, why did I pick up this book to read this?
Does this happen often when we discuss the crap that we discuss too?
It does. It does. Those are our upsetting books.
True Crime Quest of the Week is supposed to be light-hearted, isn't it? Where we have a bit of a laugh.
I think this is one that maybe people can relate to. I'm curious to hear what other people think. If you have thoughts, leave a comment on this episode. What was a book that you found, whether it was upsetting or something that you felt like was something that maybe shouldn't have been in a book? Just curious to hear what people have read out there. On our next episode, we'll discuss All of Hitman. What happened in the investigation of the triple murder in 1993?
And does Rex Farrell, the author of Hitman, remain elusive? Or do we find out who he is?
That's on the next So Much Crime.
So Little Time.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.